Hi, I'm Diane Ringel. Today I'm here to show you how to make a beaded pendant using a tube lampwork bead and some cube beads and some seed beads. This is what the pendant looks like. This particular bead is made by the Bead Fairy on Etsy. I like using tube beads for these because of the shape, and I like the cube beads because they're nice and flat on one side. It gives a nice foundation for the beading. So this is what we're going to make today. I'm going to turn the camera around and we'll get started. Okay, I'm back. You can see on my bead mat the contents of the kits that I sell. We have some seed beads here, cube beads, more 11-Os, some slightly larger cube beads. These are, what are they called, demis, and some more 11-Os. The kit will also come with a lampwork bead and a little dangle bead and some little hardware here. In addition to that, you'll need thread cutters, a needle and thread. I use 8-pound Fireline Smoky, but you can use whatever strong thread you like. You'll also need round nose pliers and flush cutters to do this project. So what I have 5 feet of the Smoky Fireline threaded on my needle, and the first step is to anchor it inside the lampwork bead. So you're going to sew through like 3 times, leaving about a 4-inch tail. So there's 1 time through. You're going to pull this nice and snug. There's my 2nd time through. Then I'm going to do a 3rd time through. And what I'm doing here is building a thread foundation for the beads to sit on. So I've got three threads going around this side of the bead, and then I want to do 3 on the other side of the bead. And that'll give us a nice foundation to anchor all the rest of our beads on. So there's once through, pull snug, twice through, and make sure that thread goes around the 2nd side of the bead, not the 1st. So there's 2 threads on that side. We'll go, actually, I don't have to go through this time. I'm going to tie a knot here, and that'll complete the 3 threads on this side. So I'm going to tie a knot to anchor all the threads, pull it as tight as I can. I think I'll do 1 more time. Pull tight, and then I really don't want to see this knot that's here on the bead. See how you can see it sitting on there? So I'm going to put this tail through the bead, let it poke out the other side, if I can get it to go. Maybe I have to put a needle on it. Okay, I'm going to put a needle on it and send it through. Usually I can get it through without doing that. I'll be right back. Okay, so I have that tail threaded through, and then what I'm going to do is pull on that. See how the knot at the top of the bead is slipping inside there. I'm going to help it a little bit. I'm pulling just enough that now that knot is not visible over here. It's right at the side. It's not going to get in our way there. I could pull a little bit more. I try to get that knot to slip just inside the bead. There. Now you can see it's kind of disappeared. So now we're ready to start the first row of beads. And to do that, we're going to pick up a cube, and then an 11-O, and another cube. So that's what I have on my needle. I'm going to slide that down. Oops. And I'm going to go under the 3 threads, under the 3 threads of that first side. Now I'm pulling and I'm going to leave my beads behind there, behind the thread, and I'm going to come up through that second cube. Oops, I got my tail involved there. I didn't want to do that. So what I want to have is this bead sitting right on top. The first cube is going to be right on top of that tube, and the second one is going to sit kind of rounding that corner. So I'm going to pull it a little bit tight, but I want to leave enough string there that this will be able to stand up like that. So now we're ready to add the second set. We're going to pick up another 11/0 and a cube and do that again. Come up through the threads from the back side and then go up through the bottom of that cube. And that's what it takes to round the corner of that bead. Now we're going to be adding cubes along this side on the straightaway. So you pick up a cube, go under those 3 threads. Oops, don't let it get tangled up like that. Come on, turn around. There we go. Pull it nice and snug so it sits on the side like that. Just keep adding the cubes until you reach the next rounded edge of the bead. Oops, it's getting tangled on me. I like these cube beads because they sit in nice and flat and they provide a nice foundation for the rest of the beads. So we're just adding one at a time until we get down to the curved part of the lampwork bead. Oops, I didn't go through all 3 of the threads, so I'm going to back that out. Okay, and I'll probably have to rethread my needle now. This will be real painful to watch on video because my hands shake and my eyesight's pretty bad. Okay, I'll meet you back. Okay, got my little mess straightened out. Now I'm going to continue down the side, going under all 3 of the foundation threads and pulling it snug one by one until we reach the curved end. I really love these tube beads. They're fun to decorate like this. I make enamel pieces, but I love lampwork. And I love making them with all kinds of different colors. Okay, so that's the last bead. Oops, let's see if I can get this in focus. That's the last bead before the bead starts to curve here. So when I add the next cube bead, it's kind of going to be pointing off this direction. So this is the point where I need to pick up an 11/0 before I add the next cube bead. So I'm going to pick up one of the little purple 11/0s. And a cube bead, and then go under all 3 threads again. and then up just through that cube bead. Oops. I hope I haven't been doing that too much, making it so it's off camera instead of on camera. Okay, so I've picked up the 11-0 and the cube, and now I'm going to go under the threads on the first side. Sometimes it's easier to go under in the straight part and then just yank the thread to get it where you want it to be. Okay. Now I want this bead here, the cube bead, to be the very to center on the hole in the lampwork bead. So I've gone under the 3 threads on this side. Now I'm going to go under the 3 threads on this side so that I can pull and get that centered. And now I'm going to go up through that cube bead. And what I want to be able to do is get that bead centered right on the hole, because we want to run a piece of wire up through there. So that's our next step. I'm going to get my wire and I'll meet you back. Okay, I'm back with my wire. What I have here is a pair of bail making pliers. I like these because they're graduated and you can run multiple loops around the pliers without the loops being different sizes. But you can do this with your standard round nose pliers as well. So what I do here is leave about an inch long tail on the wire. Just wrap around, rolling the pliers back and pinching until I get 2 loops of the same size on the wire. Now I'm going to pull this wire back to create a 90-degree bend and take that 1-inch tail that we had left and wrap it around the stem once or twice. I like to go twice around for the bail and twice around for the stem. And now we're going to come in with flush nose pliers, if I can find the flush pliers, cutters, and trim that end off. Now, what we did, this is the bottom of the stem wire. And what I want to do is have this center going through the cube beads and everything, but I need to add all the beads that we're going to put on this. So this is a finished model. So you can see here we're going to start by picking up one of these little 11s, then a bigger cube, then another purple 11, and then we can go up through. So I'm going to pick up a purple. Now, the different kits might have different colors on here. You have to pay attention to your kit instructions because the colorways may be different. So I've got the purple. I'm going to get the cube and the other purple. Okay, and now I'm going to feed this wire up through this cube bead, through the lampwork bead, out the other side, and through the lamp or the cube bead that's on that end, because I want the cubes to be centered on the bead. So that's what we've got. We're going to add some more beads up here when we get there, but for now I'm just going to bend this so it doesn't come out. And now we can continue on with our beadwork, whoops, down this side of the bead. Okay, so we're picking up here where the bead is coming out from that bottommost cube bead. And so we're going to have to pick up an 11-0, one of the little purples, and a cube. And now we're going to start going down this side of the bead. It's easier to grab all 3 of these coming through the straight side, not where it's so tight around the corner. So I just come through down here and pull the bead tight and let the thread slide the thread up to where it needs to be, and then go up the bottom of the cube and out, and we can get that spaced nicely there. Again, we're going to add an 11 before the cube bead because we're rounding that bend, going under all 3 threads, and then back out the bottom of that cube bead. Oops, not the 11-0, just the cube. And now we're on our straightaway, and we can just add one at a time all the way down to the curve. Oops. It is a little difficult to work around my computer here to film this, but you get the picture. It's what we've been doing all along. Just adding one cube at a time. And sliding it up, snugging it up, making sure you pick up all 3 of the threads of your foundation. And we're just working brick stitch around here. Now, I want to go back and talk about this. When we added the stem here, I picked up a purple and a cube and a purple. If you look at the sample here, that's exactly what I did. But if you can see it, it's like the purple kind of interrupts that second white row that we're about to put on. So you might decide you want this white line to be unbroken and pick up a white bead there instead of the, or whatever color you happen to be working on. If you can see what I mean here, this white row here gets interrupted by that other color. So that's just a design choice. If you want to back that out and change the bead to a different color, you can. But I'm just going to continue on. And I'll meet you back at the curve. Okay, we're at the point where the next bead that's going to be added is kind of going to be straddling that corner. So I want to pick up in a little 11-0 to space it out, and then a cube. I go under the 3. Again, it's easier to go under back here and just pull the thread up to where you want it. So that's what I usually do. And then go up through the bottom of that cube. And now we're going to add an 11-0 spacer bead, one of the little purples, and go down through the cube here. And you might have to bend this wire out in order to get the cube away a little bit to get your needle through. Okay, I'm going to back the wire out a little bit. So I can go down through that cube. And then I'm going to go up through this cube. And before I pull too tight, I want to get that wire back in where it belongs. Through that cube and out. Okay, now that it's in there, I can pull that tight. Okay. And I gotta see. Okay, now we're going to go across the 11s, the little spacer beads there. I go through that purple. Oops, did I tangle? I got my line tangled around the wire. Did not mean to do that. So I'm going through that 11 and through the next 11. And this is where we're going to start the second row. Okay, to start this second row, we're going to pick up 2 of the white 11-0s, and we're going to go under this thread between the cube and the 11-0. And then we're going to go back up just one of those beads and pull it tight. Now we're just going brick stitch down this whole thing using the bridging thread from the first row to anchor, and just adjusting the spacing as needed to get the beads to lay where they need to go. So I want to get that thread right before that purple bead. It's a little tricky at the curve. Oops. It's also tricky if your eyes are bad. There we go. Just keep adding one at a time, going under that bridging thread. I want to be under that side of the purple this time. And I'm just kind of pushing the beads around a little bit. I want that purple to fall in the space and the white beads to go around it. So there we go. I'm just adding one at a time, going under the bridging thread and back up through the 11-0s. And I'm just going to work my way all the way around here. Brick stitch all the way around. So I'll meet you back at the curve here. Okay, I'm reaching the curve here, and as you can see, I decided that I didn't like that purple bead being there, so I pulled out that whole wire and replaced it with a white one so that it looks like an entire row of white going around without any purple interrupting it. So I'm just going around the corner here, but I'm not really doing anything differently. I'm using the bridging thread for a foundation, and I'm just, spacing these as needed. Now you can see that purple isn't fitting down there nice enough to get me a nice snug change there, but I guess that's okay. You just do the best you can. It would be nice if maybe if this was a 15-0 instead of an 11-0, it would be a little neater. You could play around with that, but I don't know. I didn't, so it is what it is. This gets a little trickier because you got to make sure your thread doesn't get tangled around that wire. Okay, so now I get to this point, and what I want to do is incorporate this. Okay, so I'm rounding the corner, and I've met up with the stem, and you can see I changed out that purple bead for a white because I think I like to just continue the design. So what you're going to do with the beading thread here is just wrap it around that center stem, and then continue on the other side, picking up a single. Oops, I lost my needle. I'll be right back. So you've wrapped around the stem, and we're going to keep going brick stitch down the side till we meet up with the other end. Okay, so I've got my 11-0. I'm just going to pick up the bridging thread here to hold it. Go back up through that 11-0. Pull it snug. And just continue on down the line, picking up a bead, going under the bridging thread from the first round. Oops. And back up. Okay, and I'm just going to continue on down the line till we get to the bottom, and I'll meet you there. Okay, I am back at the top of the pendant, and now I'm going to add the remaining beads on the wire stem. So I kind of like the continued look of the white on here, so I'm going to, instead of a purple like the pattern calls for, I'm going to add another white bead, and then I'm going to add a cube. And then I'm going to finish with the bail here. So what I'm going to do is grab with my bail making pliers, and I'm going to grab it up an inch or so, inch and a half, and I'm just going to start rolling back with these bail pliers until I get 2 times around. And I want just enough room there to wrap the stem around a couple times. So I'll squeeze that together, and then I'll use that tail, whoops, see if I can get this on camera, and wrap around the stem 2 times. It's just a personal preference. If you like bails with just 1 loop of wire and 1 loop around, you can do that, but I'm doing 2. Let's see if you can see that. And I want those loops to sit right up on top of the stem, so I'm just going to bend that back a little bit so you can see. I like to have the loops perpendicular to the stem wire. So there it is, and I'll use my flush cutters to cut off the end. Now the end of your wire will tend to shoot out, so I cover that with my thumb to make sure it doesn't fly across the room or hit me in the face. So there we go. It's time to start the next, it's time to start the next round, which is the cube stacks. So I'll meet you back in just a second. Okay, so we're going to finish out this round, and what I want to do, you can see the thread is coming out of this bead. I want to kind of tie in the bead we just added, even though it's on the stem and we're not going to sew through it, and I'm going to do that by getting that thread to wrap around the stem just above the white bead. Okay, now this is the first bead we started with in this round, and it's just a little bit loose, so we're going to come down through the top into the bottom and pull, and that should tighten that up and try to get it into alignment with all the rest of them. And we can come up through the bottom of this bead that's right next to the purple, and that should set us up for beginning the bead stack, or the cube stacks. Okay, so that's pulled everything together, and we're ready to start the cube stacks. So these, we pick up a cube and a demi and an 11-0. That's what the stack looks like. Now on your pattern they might be different colors or different orders, but so we've gone up through those 3 beads. Now we're going to skip that 11-0 because that's our stop bead, and come back down, and we're going to go back in the second row of the second bead of the second row, which is the second white bead there. Don't go back in through the purple. Now we can pull this little 11-0 down a little bit in order to get the stack placed exactly where we want it. We want the stacks to start right where the straight beads go. So now for the second one, we come out the next bead in that round. We grab another stack, which is a cube, a demi, and an 11-0. Now when we go back down, we skip the first bead, And we came up through that second white bead right there. We're going to go down through the next bead. So these cubes are going to straddle 2 beads. The cube stacks are. So for the next one, we come out the next bead in that row and pick up a stack, which is a cube, a demi, and an 11-0. And then we go back down through those first 2 beads and into the next bead in the row. And you just keep going like that all the way around. And I'll meet you down here at the first, the cube bead on the stem. Okay, I've made it to the curve here, and you'll see if I put this next bead stack across 2 beads, it's the spacing is going to be really wide here. So I'm going to try and add 2 stacks in there. So I'm going to pick up a cube, a demi, and an 11. My thread is coming out that first 11 of the curve. So I'm going to skip that first bead and go back down through, and I'm going to go back down through the bead I came up, that same bead. And there's my first stack. So now I'm going to come up the second bead in the curve, come out that bead, pick up my stack, a cube, a demi, and an 11. And now if I sit right on top of that bead, the spacing between the stem bead and this one is pretty wide. So I want it to sit more to this side. So I'm going to go down this bead. Oops, whoops, whoops, whoops. I got to go back through my stack first. Okay. So I'm going to skip the last bead added, go back down through those 2 and into that bead. Now, what you can do is pull out the stop bead. Pull tight like that and get your bead situated where you want it to be, and then pull the thread down. And that, in doing that, you can kind of adjust which direction, where that stack is actually going to sit. So there, I've got it evenly spaced now. So now I'm going to come up I'm going to go across the central wire there, and I'm going to come out of the white bead on the other side. Oh, if I can. It's really tight there. Oops, just stabbed myself with the needle. All right, flip it over, see if it's any easier from the other side. Oops. There we go. Okay, that looks good. Now I think I'm going to have my next stack straddle these 2. That'll have it pointed kind of in the right direction. I'm going to skip that last bead added, go back down to those 2 and into the next bead. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to put that bead where I want it, pull out that stop bead, and then pull tight on the thread. That adjusts it to that spot right there. Now I'm going to come out the next white bead, and I'm going to have the next one straddle these 2. skip the top bead and go back into that one. Now, same thing here. I'm going to situate that bead where I want it to be. Pull that stop bead out tight. And while I'm pinching that bead where I want it to land, I'm pulling in the thread. And that's where I want that. Okay, I'm going to come out the next bead. This is hard to do around the camera. Okay, I'm nearing the end here. I just have one more stack to add, so I'm going to pick up the beads I need. And then I'm going to have this last stack straddle these two beads. So I'm skipping the last bead added and going down through that next bead. Again, I'm pulling out that stop bead, pinching the bead where I want it to stay, and then pulling tight, and that's what I've got. So it looks like we ended up with even beads and ending at the same place, so that all looks good. So now what I'm going to do to end is I'm just going to sew up through, oh god, I got a tangle here. So up through this last bead again, just reinforcing it, and then back down. And what this does is, I don't know if you noticed when I tugged on that, it fixed the spacing right here. These two beads were kind of far apart, but by sewing through a second time, it pulled them closer together. Now they look better. And I'm just going to continue to sew through some of these bead stacks a second time. I'm going to go up this one. Basically, I'm weaving the tail end in by going through these stacks a second time. It's going to make them nice and snug, so they'll be nice and stiff. They'll stand up straight and look nice. It also makes it so you don't really have to worry too much about tying a knot or the thread working loose. I'm going to go back through all of these a second time, or until I run out of thread. And what I might do to anchor it is I'm coming through a one of the bridge threads there, and this is tying a knot around a bridging thread just for a little more security. But I'll just continue sewing through these stacks a second time until that end is too short to sew anymore. And then what I'll do is sew in this end a little bit and clip it off. But that's the finished, almost finished project. I forgot. The last thing to do is to add the little dangling lampwork bead. Okay, so the last thing left to do is to add the little bead dangle on the bottom of the pendant here. So I've got a head pin, and I'm going to pick up some little accent beads. I think I'll pick up a gold bead and a demi, and then I'm going to go through the dotty washer so that the dots will be on the bottom of the bead like that. So now I'm going to take my round nose pliers, and I'm going to make a 90-degree bend at the top of that bead like that. And then I'm going to take my round nose pliers and grab about, a little less than an inch beyond that bend, and then roll my wire back to make a little round loop on top of that bead. Oops. You can see there, and then I'm going to add that to the pendant, and I'll straighten it up. So this is the top of the pendant, so it goes on the bottom right here. And I'm going to squeeze that loop with my round nose plier and I'm going to straighten it out a little bit so it sits on top of the bead, and then take that stem and wrap around a couple of times to secure it. And then use the flush cutters to trim it off. And there is the finished pendant. I hope you enjoyed the project, and maybe I'll see you again next time. Bye.